What would you do if a child vanished under black water while a crowd of adults stood frozen, clutching their umbrellas like shields? Would you look away or jump? The first scream cut through the rain like broken glass. "Help Mateo, somebody help him!" It carried down the marble lobby of Alameda Residential and into the storm-drowned street. In Polanco, Monday afternoon had turned the avenues into fast, shivering rivers. Wind bucked the ficus trees, thunder hunched close, and water pressed against the curb like a beast trying to climb out. The drain cover had ripped free, iron yanked up and gone. In its place waited a mouth in the concrete, a black, frothing throat. Mateo Valdez was 6 years old. He had been holding the strap of his backpack with both hands the way his teacher taught him as he stepped off the shuttle and onto the slick sidewalk. A slip, a gasp, the world tilting. Then the hungry pull of water dragging him down and through. Arms waved, phones lifted. Someone shouted, "Fire department!" Someone sobbed, "Where is his father?" Rich shoes backed away from the filthy flood, chewing at their soles. Perfume, panic, disbelief. None of it mattered because the drain did not care who wore a watch that cost a car and who did not. It only knew to take. It took leaves and branches and trash, and now it was taking a boy. He surfaced once, panicked eyes wide, gulped air and dirty water, and vanished backward into the pipe. The current sucked him around a bend. The sound of the rain was everywhere. The sound of the crowd was everywhere. The sound of the child caught in the throat of the city was the worst sound of all. A young woman in a blue work uniform dropped a bucket of cleaning supplies so hard the plastic cracked. "Out of the way!" Her voice was not big, but it was a blade. She was small, dark-haired, sleeves already soaked to the elbow, and she came running through bodies too stunned to move. "Don't!" someone begged. "It's too dangerous." She kicked off her shoes. She climbed down. The cold hit her like a fist, straight to the ribs, and then all of her was in the water. "Mateo, Mateo, I'm here!" The water burned her eyes, salted her tongue with grease and metal and rot. She didn't stop. She dragged herself forward along ribs of concrete, felt the current test her grip, felt it like a living thing trying to pry her fingers loose. The pipe narrowed and turned. In that bend, clinging to a crossbar like a shipwrecked sailor to a mast, a small boy lifted his head. "Tia? Jimena." His voice was a blade of glass, thin, cutting. "I've got you, mi niño. Hold on." He let go with one hand and then the other. He wrapped his skinny arms around her neck. She tucked him tight, turned her body broadside to the pull, and fought. The return was worse. He shook with cold and shock. Her clothes dragged her down, sticky with river weight. The drain snarled. She didn't think about drowning. She thought about a child who liked to wave at her after school, about the boy who had once shyly asked if pushing the elevator button counted as a superpower because he was small but quick. She thought, "Go. Now. Go." Hands reached down from the circle of umbrellas. There were grunts, curses, wet palms. Fingers caught her wrists. Someone slipped and fell to their knees and came up with bleeding knuckles and didn't let go. She pushed Mateo first into their arms, then found the strength to lift herself after him. The world above the drain looked unreal. Glass facades flashing with rain, SUV lights smeared into soft stars, people cheering because they could breathe again. Jimena's hair stuck in wet strands to her cheeks. Mud gritted under her nails. She put the boy on her lap, held him, listened for breath, the stubborn rise and fall of his chest, the strong beat of his life. He blinked up at her and with teeth chattering tried to smile. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved me." A black sedan skidded to the curb. A tall man in a rain-dark suit ran toward them, a face turned to bone by fear. "Mateo!" His voice cracked on his son's name. "Sir," the building manager stammered. "There was an accident, but he's all right." She pulled him out. The man's eyes met Jimena's for the first time. What he saw was a young woman in a cheap uniform soaked through and shivering, a woman who did not belong in his world, and yet right now was the only reason his world was not ending on a sidewalk in the rain. "What's your name?" he asked, as if he was suddenly afraid to forget it. "Jimena Morales," she said softly. "I work here. I clean the common areas. You saved my son, he said, as if he could not believe the words even while saying them. Sirens howled. In the emergency room's cold light, the doctor pronounced the boy lucky. A little water swallowed, no lungs flooded, a watchful night, then home. The man Sebastian Valdez, 34, a face that made magazines call him visionary and rivals call him dangerous, sat on a plastic chair beside a woman who kept wiping her hands on a uniform that could not get any drier. When she stood to go, he touched her elbow. Please stay, he said. He might call for you. This isn't a place for me, she murmured. I'm all dirt and drain water. You saved my son. He said it again, like a vow. Any place is yours. When Mateo woke, he did ask for her. He said her name as if it were a nightlight. She leaned over the rail. He reached for her. She told him a story about a brave little fish that swam into storms to find other lost fish and guide them home. He fell asleep with a hand curled in her sleeve. Sebastian stood in the doorway, watching the way she watched his son. She didn't speak to him like he was made of glass. She spoke to him like he was a person. Respect and warmth and no pity. He had forgotten the way that sounded. A measured voice cut the quiet. Where is my grandson? Oh, the man in the doorway wore an immaculate suit and a look that made nurses move faster. His hair, iron gray and sculpted, did not believe in rain. His eyes measured. They also dismissed. Papa, said Sebastian too quickly. He's fine. This is the woman who saved him. The older man, Hector Valdez, let his gaze settle on Jimena, as if on a smudge on glass. I see, he said. He did not say thank you. Shame rose hot in Jimena's throat. She had come out of a drain with a child in her arms. Now a glance could make her feel small. She whispered that she should go. She needed to shower, change, go home to her mother, make sure there was soup for dinner. Sebastian thanked her again. Hector waited until her footsteps had faded, and then, without turning his head, said, We will have to keep an eye on this. 2 days later, the mansion in Lomas de Chapultepec opened its heavy doors to a boy with a bandage still wrapped around his wrist and a new fear that woke him in the dark. He asked on the first night and the second and the third if Tia Jimena would come to tell him about the small brave fish. The housekeeper brought warm milk. The driver bought a night lamp with a moon painted on it. A professional nanny arrived the next morning, her resume stamped in gold. None of it wrapped the child the way Jimena's voice did. On the fourth day, under the chandelier of the marble lobby, where her mop had found grief and spilled coffee and glitter, Jimena turned at the sound of polished shoes. Senor Valdez, she said to Hector, because respect had been stitched into her since childhood. I came to thank you. His tone made it sound like a punishment. What you did was brave. Now it's time to return to normal. She waited because surely normal meant a boy who had touched drowning and now needed soft light and steady voices. Your place, Hector continued, is here with your work. My grandson's place is in his home, with his family. We must not confuse those worlds. The words were cold and efficient. They cut like steel. Jimena said she understood. She did. She also understood how quickly a door could close on a child's heart. That afternoon in the underground lot, Sebastian found her loading a cart with garbage bags and brooms. How are you? He asked, a real question. I'm fine, sir, she said. And Mateo? He keeps asking for you. Her eyes lifted and fell, a small tide. He will be fine. He's strong. I'd like you to visit, he said. She shook her head. It's better if he doesn't get attached. Who told you that? His voice could be gentle until it wasn't. Footsteps echoed. They both turned. Hector emerged from between columns as if the light claimed him. He looked at his son. He looked at the woman. He did not look pleased. By the time he left, Jimena's lips had pressed into a line, and her hands had found work to do that didn't need doing. That night, a nightmare dragged Mateo under again. He woke crying because in the dream he slipped and she did not come. Sebastian held him. He held himself back from calling Jimena. He didn't last. He found her by the children's play area, sweeping leaves from rubber flooring into a bright blue dustpan. It's about Mateo, he said. He keeps asking for you. He told me you were distant yesterday. Why? Jimena stared at the broom. People talk, she said. They say attachment can hurt. People, he repeated softly. Or my father. She didn't answer, which was an answer. Before he could speak again, sneakers slapped the path. Tia Jimena! Mateo ran to them, breathless. A tall woman with a cold mouth hurried after him, coiling her scolding like a whip. Mateo, she snapped, you cannot run away from your nanny. The boy slid an arm around Jimena's waist the way scared children do, tight and claiming. Who is Tia Jimena? The nanny asked, arching a brow, disdain an old habit. Another employee who believes kindness is a key to the penthouse? Enough, said Sebastian. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. You're dismissed. The woman blinked. You can't be serious. Get your thing, he said, never looking away from her Jimena, and go. The nanny left fumbling for her phone. Somewhere high in a window, Hector watched and understood that whatever this was, it would not disappear by itself. That evening at 6 o'clock, Jimena stood in front of a heavy door holding a storybook borrowed from her nephew. She almost turned around twice on the way. She almost did not ring the bell. When the door opened, Sebastian saw the red around her eyes and did not ask questions that would make them shine again. Mateo chose a story about a lighthouse. He fell asleep before she reached the last page. She laid the book on the nightstand and, when she stepped into the hall, she touched the doorframe as if to steady the house. Who hurt you? Sebastian asked quietly. She opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. She had never been defended the way he had defended her in the park, and she did not know where to put that feeling in her chest. The next morning, a rumor left its first wet footprints. It was a small thing at first, a whisper into Ophelia's ear, and Ophelia's mouth was a door that rarely stayed shut. By lunch, conversations that used to pause for Jimena's hello slid closed as she approached. By evening, a blog post appeared. It did not say Jimena. It did not say Valdez. It said opportunists. It said the new fraud. It said, in polished prose that did not name itself a lie, that women sometimes staged themselves as saviors and then slid into families where grief ate at the edges. Jimena read it on a cracked phone while standing in a bus aisle, one hand on the overhead bar. The words did not use her name, and yet they wore her uniform. Her stomach turned in a way that meant she might be sick. When she looked up, her reflection in the scratched window seemed like a stranger's face in a stranger's life. At work, the portero who always greeted her with a joke now nodded like a soldier on duty. Her supervisor, a kind man with a tired back, touched the brim of his cap and said there had been concerns and could she please, for now, keep her distance from residents unless called. She said yes, then went to the supply room and stood very still. In the grocery on the corner, Jimena's mother bought rice and tomatoes and listened as the cashier sighed about the things people did for money. In the playroom, two nannies moved their charges, as if Jimena had developed a cough. In her pocket, her phone rang. The first call said she should be ashamed. The second insisted she should vanish. She hung up and pressed the phone against her leg until the heat through denim eased the shaking in her hands. Sebastian found her near the service elevator. I saw it, he said, and I don't believe a word. Thank you, she said, and named the truth anyway. People will. Let them, he said. I won't. She looked up and he saw fear behind the steady. I don't want this to hurt Mateo. Or you. You have a name, a company. I have a mop and a heart that scares me because it keeps pulling me toward a child who isn't mine. Then don't fight it, he said before he could think. The word surprised them both. He added gentler. Let me meet your family. Not because I need to confirm who you are. I know who you are. But because I want to, because it matters to me. On Saturday, he stood on a stoop in a neighborhood where elotes steam in carts and kids play football between parked cars. The little house was neat, painted the color of a soft sky, with curtains that looked like someone ironed them with care. Jimena's mother, Lourdes, opened the door and smiled a smile that made him feel like he had come home to a home he did not know he'd been missing. They ate chicken and rice in a kitchen where everything had a place and nothing was expensive. Javier, 4 years old and full of questions, giggled when Sebastian imitated the grumpy nanny's voice. Jimena's mother told him about a teenager who left school to help when her father died. About a young woman who never complained when she came home with blistered hands and kept laughing anyway. She's stubborn, Lourdes said proudly, but always for the right things. Sebastian listened to the story of a family built out of small kindnesses. He thought of glass towers and meetings where men argued in crisp shirts about risk, and he wondered if any of them understood it the way this woman did. Risk was trusting the world when it had once taken everything. On the walk back to the bus stop, city lights blinked on one by one. It smelled like tortillas and rain. At the curb, he took Jimena's hand. "You can count on me," he said, meaning more than he was ready to say. She looked at their hands and then at him. "Thank you," she whispered. The bus doors hissed open and she climbed aboard. He stood on the sidewalk and watched it pull away, the interior lights passing like windowed photographs. Her face turned toward a seat, her shoulders square, her head held up. He realized with a kind of quiet acceptance that frightened him less than he expected, that he was falling in love. From high windows back in Polanco, eyes watched. There are always windows. There are always eyes. Some see and understand. Some only calculate. A week later, Hector called a woman named Alicia into his office, which was really a lonely corner of a polished world. Alicia wore her uniform like a shield and worry like another uniform underneath. Her daughter needed surgery. The public hospital had a waiting list that stretched into fog. "What would you do for opportunity?" Hector asked, voice warm the way a closed hand can be warm. "What do you need, Don Hector?" Alicia asked because she understood trades. "Nothing yet," he said, "but soon." By then the blog had done its work. The whisper had become a murmur, had become a hum. The building management called a meeting. On the agenda, security, vendor access, and a vague phrase about boundaries. Ophelia sat with her arms crossed, ready to contribute. Beatrice, the administrator, looked tired but determined to stay fair. A handful of owners nodded along. Hector arrived with a folder and polished concern. He spoke about privacy, about the vulnerability of children, about how grief could be exploited if people were not careful. He never said Jimena's name. He didn't have to. And still, the storm he summoned did not blow Jimena away. She kept showing up. She kept clocking in. She kept telling Mateo stories. The little boy slept better. He started drawing lighthouses and fish, and a person with long hair and a blue shirt save a little stick figure boy from a big black tunnel. "Tell me again about the brave fish," he would say, handing her crayons. "One day," she would begin, "a storm came." Night after night, she thought about leaving. Night after night, she pictured Mateo's face when she told him goodbye. Night after night, she put her uniform on in the morning anyway. The next escalation was ugliest because it hid. Numbers she didn't recognize. Voices with no names. "We know who you are. You think you're special? Go back to your place." She started keeping her phone in a bowl by the door. She told Lourdes nothing, because what could they do with a bowl of fear? She walked to the bus with her keys pinched between her fingers. She kept her chin up and hated that she had to choose between dignity and safety when all she ever wanted was to keep a small boy from drowning in nightmares. "File a police report," Sebastian urged. "They'll ask for names I don't have," she said. "They'll ask me to prove that words can bruise." "Then I will," he said. "I will prove it." As he began to pull at threads, as he called editors and lawyers and warned the building administration that if anyone slandered Jimena by name, he would scorch the ground with lawsuits, Hector set his own final piece with patient hands. He did not need the law. He needed the court of public opinion inside a building where opinion is another form of currency. The neighbor chat lit up at 11 p.m. A photo appeared, taken from the lobby camera. Jimena in her uniform stepping into the private elevator beside Sebastian and Mateo. The caption did not accuse. It asked a question. Appropriate? A new storm. The next morning, the concierge avoided Jimena's eyes. The florist in the lobby watered ferns and said nothing. Two teenagers home from an international school stared too long. Jimena squared her shoulders and pushed her cart. In the penthouse, a boy ran to the door when the bell rang. "Tia Jimena!" He held up paper. "Look, it's us." 3 stick figures, 4 if you counted the lighthouse. "Beautiful," she told him. "Can you draw the storm calm now?" "What does that look like?" he asked. "Blue," she said. "Blue like the sky after." She read him a story and tucked him in. Sebastian walked her to the door, and in the hall he stopped. "I know this is costing you," he said. "It costs you too," she replied. It's worth it, he said before the door swung shut. You're worth it. Was it love? It felt like a current you could choose to fight, or you could turn and let it carry you, trusting that it led somewhere better than where you started. In quiet rooms after midnight, Jimena admitted the truth to herself. She had fallen. Not the way you fall into drains, the way you fall into a story that insists on being told. Hector believed he could edit that story. He had wielded money like whiteout his entire life. If he crossed something out, people learned not to read it. When he realized the line he meant to erase was written in a child's happiness and his son's relief, he reached again for the oldest tools he owned, doubt and pressure and threat. He found Jimena in the parking level again, because that was where people like him found people like her, where the light was bad and the walls echoed. We can end this quickly, he told her, voice low enough to hide. Leave my family alone. I'll make sure you keep your job. I'll make sure your supervisor gives you the morning shifts you prefer. Walk away. I'm not in your family, she said, even as her heart argued with that sentence. I know that. Good, he said. Then act like it. Mateo had a nightmare, she said. I stayed until he fell asleep. I'm not climbing into your life. I'm folding a blanket over a little boy who has lost too much. You don't know what families are like up here, he said softly, almost kindly, which was worse. We have rules. We have responsibilities. So do we, she answered. And in that we was a small house and a tired mother and a nephew who still believed fish could be heroes. His face hardened. If you tell my son about this conversation, he said, I will deny it. He will believe me, and he will fire you. The lie stung more than the threat. She thought of Sebastian's eyes. He would not believe it. Would he? Do you know what's really dangerous about feelings? Hector asked, as if he were teaching a lesson in a boardroom. They make smart men do stupid things. My son is a smart man. He lost a wife too young. He holds on to whatever comforts him. He will hold on to you, and then you will hold on to him. That's how it starts. How does it end? She wondered aloud. In disaster, he said. It always does. It doesn't have to, she thought fiercely, but she kept the words behind her teeth. It doesn't have to. The news cycle spun. The rumor oiled itself. It slithered through chat threads and morning coffee and playdates. It tried to wrap itself around Jimena's throat and pull. She kept breathing. She held on to the sound of Mateo's steady sleep as if it were a rope. One afternoon, while she arranged envelopes in the mailroom, Sebastian stepped in, closed the door against the hallway hum, and set his phone on the metal table. I found him, he said. Found who? The blogger. And he didn't care. That's how it works. He said he didn't name you, he didn't name me, and if people saw shadows where he drew shapes, that was our fault for making the shapes fit. He called it social commentary. Jimena's mouth ticked like she might laugh if she were a different woman in a different life. What will you do? Something he can't delete. He hesitated. I want to host a small event here, in the building, for the staff, for the people who keep this place from falling apart. A thanks. Public. I want people to see you the way I see you. Your father will hate that, she warned. My father doesn't own my eyes, he answered. The invitation went out. A barbecue on the garden terrace. Families welcome. A small live band with a trumpet that made kids dance. Cakes iced in the colors of the building's logo. The owners mingled with the cleaners and the maintenance team and the front desk crew. The rich made small talk about schools and weather. The staff smiled carefully and ate tacos on napkins. It was awkward and lopsided, and because of that, honest. Jimena wore a plain dress the color of clay and stood beside Lourdes, who had arrived with a bowl of beans because she didn't know how not to bring something. Javier chased helium balloons and called the saxophone a metal snake. Mateo beamed the way children beam when they see their favorite person in a crowd and understand that this person is still theirs to see. Hector came for the speeches. He stood in the back with his mouth a straight line. Sebastian stepped up to the mic, and the warm night made the lights look like small moons. Some days, he said, you discover who you are only because someone else shows you. Some days you learn that strangers will do for your family what you were certain only family could do. Some days you learn what bravery looks like, and it isn't loud or shiny. It's wet and cold and a little bit afraid, and it jumps anyway. He didn't say Jimena's name, but he didn't need to. Faces turned. In the brief silence, the building itself seemed to listen. "Thank you," he finished simply, and when he stepped away from the mic, Mateo ran up and grabbed Jimena's hand, because speeches are only speeches, and kids care mostly about what is real. When the clapping thinned, when the band packed away their instruments, when paper plates stacked and the air smelled like grilled meat and night jasmine, Hector crossed to the group like a man crossing a battlefield to collect a fallen flag. He chose his moment the way he chose everything carefully. "I see you've made your point," he told Sebastian. "Now hear mine. If you continue, you will lose something you care about very much." "You?" asked Sebastian, too tired to keep his civility polished. "Not me," said Hector, looking past him to where Mateo drew stars in the condensation on his glass. "Him." That night, Sebastian and his father had a fight. Not the kind thrown around dining tables like plates, the kind that detonates quietly and echoes forever. Words like duty and protection and image met words like respect and happiness and trust. They hurled the past at each other the way people do when the present feels like quicksand. Neither of them walked away the same. The next mornings arrived, and with them, small, hard acts of sabotage. A scratched tire on Sebastian's car that looked like a nail but wasn't. A complaint to building management that Mateo was yelling too loudly during story time. A whisper to the school that suggested concern. Every time Jimena told herself this would break her, she did not break. Every time she told herself she could not keep moving, she took one more step. In the middle of it all, life did the small, normal things that keep it life. Sebastian taught Mateo how to make pancakes that looked like lopsided dogs. Jimena bought new shoelaces because her old ones kept coming undone at work. Lourdes started a basil plant on the windowsill and said if you speak kindly to leaves, they grow sweeter. Javier lost his first baby tooth and cried until Jimena put the tiny tooth in her palm and told him that losing something sometimes meant you were making room for something better. But the storm wasn't done. Rumors, like rivers, carve deeper paths when no one blocks them. The building chat shared a screenshot and invoice that implied Jimena had accepted money from a resident. It was, for a few hours, a victory for those who wanted her gone. It was also a forgery. The proof surfaced because Alicia, who had said yes to opportunity with tears in her eyes, could not sleep. Lies are heavy. You can put them down for a while. They still wait. On a Wednesday morning that smelled like bleach and mop water, she approached Jimena near the service closet. "Can I talk to you?" Alicia whispered. "Of course." Alicia's hands shook. She told the truth the way a person carries a burning pan to a sink fast and clumsy and terrified of the damage. She explained the offer that wasn't called a bribe, the favor that wasn't called a threat, the man whose voice sounded like promises that owed nothing. "I'm sorry," she finished, crying. "He said it would help my daughter. I thought it would end sooner. I didn't know it would be this." Jimena took her hands. "We'll fix it," she said. "Your daughter will get her surgery. We'll fix it." "How?" Alicia asked, because hope is a foreign language when you've been speaking fear. "Together," Jimena said. When she told Sebastian, he didn't erupt. He didn't storm anyone's office. He called a lawyer. He called Beatrice. He called the security company that handled the building's cameras. He called the school and warned them not to return any calls they might receive from anonymous concerned parties. He called his father. Then finally, furious and steady, he went downstairs to find Jimena and told her what he should have said on the first day in the rain. "I can't promise it will be quick," he said, "but I won't let you stand alone again." "You never did," she said softly. "I just didn't know how to believe it yet." The hearing in the building's conference room looked nothing like court and felt exactly like court. Residents gathered in chairs that squeaked. Staff stood along the walls. The air conditioning hummed like it was nervous. Beatrice read the agenda, voice level. Item 3, allegations concerning staff conduct and impropriety. Hector, when it was his turn, chose his words like polished stones. He never said exploit. He never said gold digging. He never said the quiet part. He said concern and potential and boundaries. He sounded reasonable. Reason is a costume. Anyone can wear it. Sebastian stood. He did not clear his throat. When my son fell into a storm drain, one person moved while the rest of us froze. When fear hijacked his sleep, one person sat and read until he breathed slow. When the internet invented a story to sell clicks, one person kept showing up to work because bills still need paying whether your name is dragged or praised. And when someone tried to forge a receipt to push that person out of this building, that person didn't explode or cry loud or quit. She simply told the truth. He put the fake invoice on the table. The camera footage appeared on a screen and angle of the mailroom where the forged paper had been slipped into a slot. It showed a hand. It showed a ring. It showed enough for Beatrice to raise her eyebrows and for murmurs to stutter around the room. Alicia stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "I did it," she said. "Because I was desperate and because a man with power pressed on that desperation until I said yes. I'm sorry. I'll accept any consequence, but please don't punish Jimena for what I did." Silence is a weapon. It can also be a bomb. For one beat, it was neither. It was a held breath. Then someone clapped. It was Ophelia, of all people, who always clapped first when bands played in the garden. She clapped now because, in that moment, she remembered who she was before gossip made her interesting. Others joined. It wasn't applause for spectacle. It was approval of a choice. It was a small building choosing to be a little better than it had been the day before. Hector felt something he had not felt in years. Outnumbered. Later, after the meeting bled into conversations and conversations into plans, after Alicia signed a statement and Beatrice promised a review of ethics and access and rumors, after Sebastian told Jimena he was proud of her in a voice that did not shake this time, after Mateo raced down the hall with a crayon-sketched sailboat and shouted, "Look, it's the Brave Fish's ship." After all of that, the building's front doors slid open and rain came in patterns again across the patio. Jimena stepped outside. The air smelled clean, like the moment after a storm when the city remembers it is a city and not a river. She looked up, let a few drops cold on her cheeks, and thought how strange it was that everything had started with water and fear, and would now, maybe, end with water and something like peace. A car door shut behind her. She turned. Hector stood in the overhang shadow, out of the rain on principle. "You have done an impressive job," he said, the words shaped as a compliment and used as a knife. "I told the truth," she replied. "You turned a building against a man who has lived here since before you were born." "I didn't turn anyone," she said, and when she said it, she believed it. They turned themselves. "Take the win," he said, and then added vicious only in the sharpness with which he smiled. "But know this, victories like yours are temporary. Gravity always wins. People settle into their places." "We'll see," she said, more calmly than she felt. He watched her walk back in. He wondered if he had underestimated her. He had underestimated the two of them, Jimena and the boy who now slept without thrashing, and the man who had learned, finally, that protecting your child sometimes meant telling your father no. Weeks turned into a season. The rumor lost interest and slithered elsewhere. The blog wrote about a gala. Alicia's daughter had her surgery. Recovery built itself out of broth and rest and cartoons. The basil in Lourdes' kitchen perfumed the air when Jimena crushed a leaf between her fingers. Mateo learned to bounce a basketball. He learned to tie his shoes. He learned that not all falling ends in drowning. One afternoon, Sebastian asked Jimena to walk with him. They took Mateo to the park where jacarandas made purple confetti. Children threw it like weddings. Dogs ran happy. The sun was butter yellow and honest. When Mateo ran ahead to see a puppet show, Sebastian said, "I don't want to speak in careful circles anymore." She smiled without looking at him. "Then don't. I love you," he said, because the simplest version of the story was the truest. She exhaled slowly and faced him, the last small fear in her shoulders, smoothing out like a wrinkle in a sheet. "I know," she said. "Me too." No fireworks, no swelling music, just a soft, sure thing settling into place. Two people who had fought a storm and found at the center something warm. Even then, nothing was neat. Life never is. There were custody schedules and papers and work shifts and medicine refills and new boundaries to draw and old boundaries to forgive. There was a grandfather who sat alone at a long table and finally admitted to himself that controlling the world was not the same as loving it. He called his son on a Sunday, voice rough. "Can we talk?" he asked, meaning really talk. Maybe the answer would be yes, maybe not yet. You don't close a wound by pretending it isn't there. You close it by cleaning it out and waiting, by choosing, over and over, not to pick at the scab. One evening, months after the thunder made the city hold its breath, Jimena climbed the stairs to the rooftop where the view made the buildings look like toy blocks. She found Mateo with a kite that refused to fly because the wind was shy. "Help?" he asked. She held the kite and he held the string, and together they learned, laughing, the angle that lets a stubborn thing lift. It rose. It dipped. It rose again. The tail fluttered like a happy fish in a bluer ocean. "Do brave fish get tired?" Mateo asked out of nowhere. "Yes," Jimena said. "That's what makes them brave. They keep swimming anyway." "And what about people?" "The same," she said, and she thought of drains and rumors and meetings and tears and beans on rice and basil windows and a boy's drawings and a man's hand at a bus stop and a father who might yet learn to soften. Exactly the same. If you had been there then, if you had seen them. A small boy with his arms thrown up in joy at a kite, a woman with wind in her hair, a man leaning against the parapet with his heart unarmored. You might have thought nothing of it. Just a family on a roof, letting the city be their sky. You would have been right.